Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to our presentation today. We are Taxpayers United of America. This is going to be the best presentation you've seen all weekend, or your money back. I'm Forrest Jellick. I'm on the board, serve on the board of Taxpayers United, and with me I have two colleagues, Jared Labell, Executive Director of Taxpayers United of America, and the great, grand, famous opener, Val Zimnicki of Taxpayers United. So welcome for coming and joining us today. We're just going to refer to you as the opener from here on out. Before we get down into details, we think it's pretty important that fighting the state and the system is difficult stuff, right? We all understand that this is a difficult operation. And so we believe in the great famous quote that if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. So to kick this thing off, we're going to play a little game show for a few minutes here before we get into the nitty-gritty details and show you how we fight the state and how you could do that too. And I do have to notify the audience that yes, this is a libertarian mostly conference, and yes, this bow tie is tipping its hat to the great famous Murray Rothbard. So people ask me, and yes, that's where it's coming from. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's get down and play Taxman Jeopardy. Yes, of course, the great famous Taxman Jeopardy, where everyone plays and everybody loses. Here at Taxman Jeopardy, we have 6 different categories to pick from: local taxes, property taxes, state taxes, federal taxes, bank robber, and statist utopia. And you will note that when you win, you lose in each category, because when you play Taxman Jeopardy, of course, you always lose. So with that, we're going to go ahead and kick this off to Jared. Jared, what category would you like to select from?
I would like to go with state, please.
State taxes for -200. Good choice, Jared. Which state has the top marginal income tax rate of 2016? Who do you think that might be, Jared?
It's a tough one, but if I had to wager, I'm going to go with California.
California. Val, do you have any? What do you think?
Since you picked the biggest state, I'm going to pick the smallest state, Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. And the answer is, for -200, that would be the People's Republic of California at 13.3%, where their tax rate is trying to eclipse football scores. Congratulations, comrades. All right, we're going to go to Val. Val, what category would you like to pick?
Well, let's see. How about property taxes?
Property taxes for -200, where you play and you lose. In 2016, the great state of Illinois, the taxpayers paid $923,382,825 for local municipal pensions. That's just one pension group. Annually, how many average households' total property tax bills are necessary to fund this sum? And I'm going to give you a few to select from. A, 25, B, 100, C, 10,000, D, other.
Oh, I've got to go with other. It's got to be huge.
Big
No.
no.
10,000.
10,000 is a big number, right?
Realistic.
Big number?
Yeah.
Okay. And the answer is correct, D. 237,557 households' entire property tax payments would be required just to pay that pension fund. Nothing would go to services. Congratulations, Illinois, for playing. Good job. Let's go to Jared. Jared, what category would you like to pick from?
Let's go with the federal government and their taxes.
Federal government taxes. For -200, Jared, we're looking good here. We're losing. According to Truth in Accounting, what is the average household share to pay off a national debt of, and by the way, we checked this yesterday, so it keeps increasing, $87,046,500,000. And I'm going to give you a few to pick from. A, 1,500, B, 10,000, C, 7,500, D, other.
7,500.
It's a big number. That's a lot of money. Val, do you have any?
I have no input.
No input. And the correct answer is D, other. Oh, it happens to be $272,000, which you could buy a Ferrari GT, a Ferrari F458. I'm sorry for that money, but instead your portion of the debt is $272,000, and you get nothing for it. Thank you for playing Taxman Jeopardy. Val, we're going to go to you. What category would you like to pick?
Well, I used to do one of those occupations, so let's go with bank robber.
Bank robber, very honest living. Bank robber for -200. Based on 2006 data, what was the average take from a bank heist in the United States? Val, I'm gonna give you some options here. We'll make this a little bit easier.
Okay.
A, 1,000, B, 20,000, C, 50,000, D, other.
The average, well, when I used to rob banks, my average was about $4,300.
40, Jared, you have, he seems to be an expert.
I've never been a bank robber nor a government employee, so.
Very good. And the correct answer is, $4,300. Value would be correct, and unfortunately, in the scale of robbing people, a wholesale rookie, you should have joined the government. Congratulations. And we're going to go to Jared for this. Jared, which of these fine categories would you like to select from?
Well, I want to feel better about what's happening here. Let's go with Statist Utopia.
Statist Utopia, our favorite Statist Utopia for -200, where you play and you lose. Since 1970, inflation-adjusted cost of federally funded K-12 education has increased 200%. During that period, how much has reading, math, and science scores increased? And I'm going to give you some options here. This is a tough one. You know, there's a little bit of math involved here. It's tough, and we probably went to public school, so let's work on this. A, 10%, I did. A, 10%, B, 20%, D, 200%, a one-to-one exchange, or E, other.
20%. I might have a little bit of faith in the system.
20%.
sounds
Val, what do you?
Well, they spend so much money for the children that it's got to be 40, 50%. It's got to be up there. All that money put in.
200%, I love it. And we got a great return of, 0. 200% increase, and you got 0 increase. Congratulations. We're doing well, where everyone plays and everyone loses. Statist Utopia, and we're not going to let you pick this time because it's more correct. It's our last category, and we're just going to go ahead and go with local taxes, right? You don't have a choice. So with local taxes, -200. Without a local charter, what governmental power can raise taxes, impose new taxes and regulations, expedite seizure of private property, and grant local government eminent domain, all without citizen representation? You got this, Jared?
This must be a holdover from the New Deal and FDR.
We're going to find out.
Okay.
Well, I think it's either the Communist Party or Home Rule.
Communist Party or Home Rule for the answer, and Val, you would be correct. It's Home Rule. Caligula approves. Congratulations, gentlemen. Give yourselves a warm pat on the back because you both lost a lot of money this last 20 minutes. Congratulations. So thank you all for playing Taxman Jeopardy. We appreciate you for coming. When you play, you lose. Now with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get down to business and show you what we do. Yes, this is a little bit silly, but then again, what's happening to our country when we look at that is too. It's absurd. I'm going to transition over to Jared, and we're going to show you how in the 40 years of Taxpayers United that we have saved our state and other states billions of dollars, and how that you might be able to do that as well. We're going to give you some blueprint into it, and then we're going to have an exchange and a discussion at the end where we want to open the floor to questions because we think that's very important to have an exchange. So with that, Jared, take it away.
Thank you very much, Forrest. Very sad to have lost all that money, but of course it's going to a good cause. Thank you all again for joining us today. I'm Jared Labell, the Executive Director of Taxpayers United of America. We're very happy to say that we just celebrated our 40th anniversary protecting taxpayers. 40 years ago, which would have been the bicentennial of that very important and great tax revolt known as the American Revolution. So our organization was founded by activist and economist Jim Tobin in 1976. Founded in Chicago, we're a nonpartisan nonprofit 501c4. We also, as well, have a research organization, Taxpayer Education Foundation. Our goal is to reduce and or abolish local, state, and federal taxes. In 4 decades of our existence, we have been victorious in 419 tax increase referenda, which you would be surprised, or maybe perhaps not, that money can add up to a lot, and it has severe effects on taxpayers. Nearly $200 billion has been saved since our founding between local, state, and federal taxes. So let's move to the great American Mark Twain, who said, there are 3 kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. Well, let's go with the latter to have some fun. So how is the U.S. government funded? Well, individual and corporate income taxes fund 58% of the federal government, according to the Office of Management and Budget, which is a staggering figure, of course. The hard-earned money confiscated by the federal government, it takes a majority of it, again, from individual and corporate taxes. And so we can thank Woodrow Wilson for that. So don't give him a round of applause. So of that revenue, who funds the U.S. government? Well, the top 16% of earners pay 80% of federal income taxes, while the bottom 62% of earners pay only 6% of federal income taxes, which are astonishing numbers. And keep that in your back pocket when you're talking to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren supporters. You should have some fun with those numbers. So, trust in government currently is near an all-time low. According to Gallup public opinion polls from June 1992 to January of 2010, we are seeing 81% of those polled only some of the time or never trust the government. The question put to them was, how much of the time do you think you can trust government in Washington to do what is right? Just about always, most of the time, or only some of the time. So for 19% of the population to have trust in the government and 81% to be distrustful may actually be a benefit to us who are trying to enact change, because we have seen over the decades that the government has spent our money in ways which is bankrupting our country, and we can possibly build upon that public outrage to make some real changes to the current tax code and to repeal legislation which is harming our economy. So Pew Research Center public opinion polls, this is a much longer poll, beginning from November of 1958 to February of 2014, you'll see that as this is a longer scale, it reflects still what those other polls showed, with kind of a dipping and raising of trust in government. And you'll notice, interestingly, from the Eisenhower years to Johnson, that we then see a precipitous drop during Nixon, the unelected presidency of Gerald Ford, and then we see a rise again in the distrust in government during that great period of time of Slick Willie, when he was in the White House during the early 90s. And then we see also from the era of George W. Bush to Barack Obama, a huge rise in the distrust of government, which, again, as we've seen multiple scandals over the years, it makes absolute perfect sense. Now, with that said, the majority of taxpayers still think taxes are too high. Polled by Gallup public opinion polls, the question was, do you consider the amount of federal income tax you have to pay as too high, about right, or too low? Well, a majority, 57%, said that their taxes were too high. 37%, however, said they were about right. So those people were probably current or former government employees. They know which side their bread is buttered on. Now, we're very proud that our founder and president, Jim Tobin, led a successful property tax strike in Chicago during the founding of our organization. And if you go to Mises.org, you'll be able to find this full article by the late economist Murray Rothbard entitled "The Chicago Tax Strike of 1977." I won't read everything to you. I encourage you to read the article. But property tax reassessments in Cook County, which is comprises Chicago, Illinois, and some of the suburbs, property taxes were rising 50 to 65%. In some cases, 300%. This will cause people to lose their homes. So in many ways, you don't own your home, you're simply leasing it from the government, which is unfortunate and it seems antithetical to the founding of our country and what we're purport to be about. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead. Through Jim Tobin's activism, he was able to get a libertarian message out there, as well as affect change through tax policy. And so it's important to both show taxpayers and your average citizen that the current system is very flawed, and they don't have to be of a libertarian persuasion or conservative. It really is a message that can spread to all walks of life, because all of us are under threat of losing our homes and being bankrupted by bad government policies. So, as Murray concludes part of the article, he said, politicians scared for their jobs and scared of the voters will buckle under pressure. And that's very much what they did when Jim Tobin led that property tax strike, which was the only successful property tax strike in Illinois' modern history. So what is our mission at Taxpayers United of America? Well, to reduce and or abolish local, state, and federal taxes. That will also include property taxes, sales taxes, licensing, fees, income taxes, just to name a few. We aim to alleviate the overall tax burden of hardworking taxpayers. Taxes have a deleterious effect on the population, and it is our goal to have more economic freedom for everyone across the United States. We aim to expose government largesse and systemic corruption. Now, we're based in Chicago, Illinois, so there's plenty of systemic corruption. I believe 3 of our last 7 governors have been incarcerated. So
all but I think 1 probably should be.
There you go. It is absolutely criminal what we see happening across the United States, that government officials are running wild with taxpayer funds, spending money that we don't have, and incurring large debt that is, again, having a negative effect on the economy and your average taxpayer. Now, we generate scholarly research. Oops. To be able to support lower taxes and free market institutions. So how do we fight back against the state? It's easy to say that you want to reform the system, but it's much more difficult to be able to pursue that and be effective. So the Freedom of Information Act actually just celebrated 50 years of federal legislation that allowed for exposing government documents, providing government data to your average citizen to be able to see a little bit of transparency in the government. Following that federal legislation, states enacted their own FOIA, Freedom of Information Act legislation, or it's also called public records. They have different names throughout the nation, but they basically serve the same purpose. So by putting in these FOIA requests and obtaining government data, we're able to then analyze what the government is up to. Now, that can include finding out salaries, benefits, spending, debt, and pension obligations of local taxing districts, and much other things. The FOIA legislation really is great. We were able to use the government's own laws against it for the benefit of taxpayers. So that really is one piece of legislation that I must say that I'm very happy with. Now, even then, there are many times where they will try to deny your FOIA request. They will put up as many roadblocks as possible. There are ways to be able to fight against that. We've been able to learn over the years exactly how to do so, and it's a method that, though it can be lengthy, is very beneficial. So while analyzing the government data, we will then publish that information and that research. Publicizing our data through networks of media contacts, activist groups, and free market institutions and taxpayers helps get that message across. Now, in 2016, it's easier than ever before. I'm not sure how Jim was able to do any of this in the early 70s. It boggles my mind. But today we have so much at our own disposal between social media and the internet in general. It's easier and easier to get a message across and be able to bypass many of the media roadblocks which exist. Now, luckily, we have worked very hard with media contacts, both in Illinois and other states across the nation, to be able to find journalists and reporters who are interested in this information, because many times this isn't a partisan issue. Again, we're a nonpartisan group. This is just trying to expose and show that there are problems that need to be addressed, and we hope to bring them to light. So our results. In '77, as I mentioned, we started the Cook County property tax strike, and they gave in to the protesters' demands. That included a $60 million property tax cut for homeowners, which is no small change. The protesters, including, again, our founder, Jim Tobin, led by him, had demands as to lowering and freezing the property tax assessments and repealing other legislation. And they were also able to ensure that none of the tax protesters were jailed for their activism, which, again, is fantastic and lucky for them. Unfortunately, in the years since, the Illinois legislature and other legislatures across the nation have enacted new laws to make sure that if you resist paying your taxes, it'll be much more difficult to get away with it scot-free. Between 1989 and 2016, we defeated numerous state income tax and property tax hikes. We've been to 20 different states exposing government data since our founding. And since 1976, we've defeated 419 property tax increase referenda in Illinois and across the United States. And referendas are great local elections where voters really can have an effect on the tax policy that will be affecting them. And so it's great to be able to mobilize local taxpayers and activists, and it's much simpler than federal work. Unfortunately, the federal government is basically a lost cause. But if you work at the local level, you can enact change and have a huge impact on the economic freedom of the populace. Now, since 2006, we've analyzed government pensions in 20 states. It's an issue that has come to the forefront recently, and we feel that our work has helped push it as well. We've repealed tax increases, stopped proposed tax increases, achieved government pension reform in a number of states, including Illinois, where we're based, and we've had wide-ranging publication of our research in both national and local media, TV, radio, newspaper, web publications as well. Now, the more this happens, the more it has a snowball effect. More people are aware of the issues that they're facing, and those who may not be in the know will actually have much more knowledge than they would have before. The casual participant in politics may not know all the ins and outs, but being able to expose government data and individualize such data really helps. With our pension reform in particular, we will create spreadsheets that show how much money has been contributed to pension funds, how much money has been received in retirement. Some former government employees will have paid $200,000 into their own pensions. That's a sizable chunk of money. Many of them, however, in retirement will recoup that money within 1 year. It's absolutely stunning, and we see why. In Illinois, for instance, the unfunded pension liabilities range as a conservative estimate, $111 billion. Illinois is by far the worst funded pension system, but it's across the nation. Connecticut, for having such a population with reasonably high income also has a very badly funded pension system. And there are many reasons for this. Some of it is government malfeasance. Some of it is just neglect. And that's, of course, not uncommon with government institutions. Now, estimates show that we've saved taxpayers nearly $200 billion in local, state, and federal taxes since our founding, and that's calculated by looking at what those tax increases were. A lot of times they will have direct dollar amounts of how much money, how much revenue would be generated by these tax increases, and so we use that basis to calculate from the local, state, and federal level how much we've been able to save taxpayers. So the phrase that's become very popular, taxation is theft. It's absolutely true. So we offer our services to taxpayers, activist groups, and free market institutions. We have many partners throughout the United States who are interested in what we do, and it's very important to be able to make those kind of alliances with different groups to have more of an effect on tax policy. We accept funding from private citizens, businesses, and foundations, and of course, no governments, ever. Now, we would love for activists to be able to contact us to help in your fight to liberate government documents. And as the great Frederick Bastiat said, stop legal plunder. Our focus is and forever will be championing the interests of taxpayers, whether it be where we're based in Chicago or across the United States. So, taxes are revolting, why aren't you? The time is right for taxpayers across the United States to come together and resist what the federal, states, and local governments are doing. We are being taxed into economic ruin, and it has to stop. And either de jure or de facto, it will happen. So it's important for taxpayers to come together and to make our demands known and work together to expose what the governments across the country are doing and to have an effect. And again, now's the perfect time. As we see the presidential elections with these ridiculous candidates, people are focused on that, and understandably so, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We have to start at the local level, the state level, and when you can, the federal level. And it's very important to be able to, again, work with people and be able to get your message out clearly and effectively, and we'd like to be able to help you to do that. At this time, we would love to be able to open it up to questions. We want to have a more conversational tone with the audience, so we really appreciate you for attending, and we'd love to take questions. Thank you.
Essentially, we are way, way overtaxed. We could have all the fundamental services we have now at least half the tax rates and less, and there are ways to battle it. Taxpayers United of Illinois has done a really good job saving the Illinois and other state citizens taxes, and we can show other groups how to do that.
Yes, sir.
So I'm Ford Fisher from Tax Revolution Institute, and my question is, you talk a lot about tax policy, too much taxes, et cetera. How much of the blame do you place on the people who write the tax code versus the people who enforce the tax code? In other words, how do you balance between blame Congress and blame the IRS?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a joint effort, the IRS being a creature of the Congress. So I place the blame across the board on government officials and those who enforce these laws. As you well know, the IRS is trying to crack down on nonprofit groups and try to silence free speech, which is absolutely frightening. Our speech should not be silenced, and not just us, but in general. Free speech precedes government, and it cannot be silenced. So it's very important to be able to fight back and work with groups to be able to make that point and effectively resist the IRS trying to silence opposition.
You know, to follow up with that, you're asking about that, but the other unspoken issue with a number of states, and particularly, we're very sensitive to that in Illinois and Chicago, but other states here are as well. So we could be talking about Connecticut, we could be talking about California, we can talk about a lot. A lot of states have these municipal debt burdens, and in particular, we'll speak about Chicago, in which, if you've ever heard the term the machine, the Chicago machine, basically you had municipal unions that really traded their votes to support politicians for policies that favored untenable pensions in the long run. And so taking a step aside just for a minute from the federal government issue is the burden of local state taxes, which most people kind of gloss over and miss. And in the case of Chicago and Illinois, realistically, when you're looking at the numbers, a sane person would look at this and say, you're on the path to default, which is a major issue. And on the local level, as Jared had mentioned, you have a better opportunity to change that system. And as he alluded to, when we do this research and generate these publications, and this is something that the left is very, very good at, they humanize everything they do. They hold up a child, starving, somebody, and look at what you're doing, and the policies are allowing to happen. But getting this data does the same thing in reverse. We showed that one union, for example, it takes 292,000 households to support the full property tax just to support a very small number of people collecting those pensions. That really puts a face, and because the average person that pays that bill understands that. And so taking, I know you were asking more of a federal question, but I think it's really fair and really poignant for people to start taking a look locally, most places, and start there. It's a very good place and a very powerful place to start, and it doesn't take a lot of people to show up and put pressure on the politicians and the referenda to end them. So,
and for what it's worth, many of your federal officials will start off at the local level. So if you can begin by having relationships with them and have them, as much as you can on your side, that's all for the better. We don't want to put too much faith in politicians, but that at least is one way to be able to work together and at least hopefully have an effect as they move on to other jobs and possibly into the federal government as well.
yes, sir.
Maybe a segue to the last, or your comments here. I certainly don't have a problem paying taxes, reasonable taxes. I think we all agree there. I think we all agree that to pay excessive taxes is why we need to revolt, right? Mm-hmm. My question is, it's more of a thought process, but when you say who are raising these taxes, why are they raising the taxes, and how are they raising the taxes? My obviously, who is the politicians, right? The people that control that purse strings, whatever. Yeah. But how are they doing that? I have a hard time understanding how these people get elected to make this. You're making the decisions on our behalf, but they're the wrong decisions. Mm-hmm. You're alleged to be championing the majority, which is why you're elected, but when it turns out you are championing the minority, which is, if you dig deep, it's your special interest, the lobbyists, and who are you paying back that funded your campaign to, now it's payback time, you are now raising our taxes to the majority for the minority. So my question is this, is how, if you follow the money, it makes sense. That's how it works, in my opinion anyways. But how do you stop that? How is it that you have politicians, in California a couple years ago, you had a very, very wealthy governor candidate in Meg Whitman who outspent Jerry Brown 100 to 1, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. I still am flabbergasted how Jerry Brown got elected, as opposed to, so why does society vote this way? Why do these people get elected? How do these people get elected that make the majority pay for the minority paybacks?
Let me take a quick stab at this,
Sure.
Jared, and then have you follow up.
Okay.
Excellent question. I lived in the People's Republic of California for 14 years. And now I live in the People's Republic of Chicago, which is arguably worse. Each state's a little bit different, but there seems to be a repeat pattern in the states. And I'm going to take Chicago in general, and I talked about the machine. Whose back is getting scratched and why? And in our case, it's unions, municipal unions, and they're trading their votes for the bills and the legislation to increase their pensions and their benefits. And if you just go ahead and Google, you could sit here and get on your phone and take a look at, for example, I'm going to take one of the unions, Chicago Teachers Union, and how powerful they are. The lead of that union makes over $300,000 a year. She's highly and vocally anti-free market. The argument always goes to more rich people paying for theirs, yet the product and services that we're getting out of that city are abysmal. You know, there's some estimates, I think, that 50% of the kids don't read at a 5th grade level in certain districts. It's truly, truly sad. So that's where it's coming from. The second question that you asked is, how do you defeat that? And that's a bit more difficult, but I alluded to it earlier, and personally I'm of the belief that people that are more conservative or libertarian or maybe voluntarist in their thinking, or classical liberals, we're always very intellectual. We look at numbers and we tend to overthink things, but people make decisions emotionally. And we've seen it in some of the debates regarding the president-elect coming up, and whether you're a Gary Johnson person or a Donald Trump person or other. Where I think that we typically lose is that we don't put that emotional touch that they are very good at. And look at every time that, you hear maybe a liberal in media, the first thing they do is emotional. You're a racist, or they'll say something and shut it down. And it totally emotionally changes the thing. We need to do the same thing. And so by putting faces on these, what I consider to be fat cats that have never generated a job in their life and lived on it, need to be exposed. And we need to show the hardworking people that get up every day, that try to start businesses that are, the average income in the city of Chicago, I think, is maybe $35,000 a year. Yet a teacher union person that retires at 55 and sometimes double dips gets pensions that over the years of the total pension obligations can be $20 million. So I think I wanted to start with that. Jared, I'm sure you have a lot to add.
So why are they raising taxes? That's a great question. And that's, there are numerous reasons. One is because of bad decisions on local, state, or federal officials. They will take your money and spend it in ways that make absolutely no sense. And sometimes they may actually be sensible. They may have sensible goals, but just the nature of government, bureaucracies have a lot of trouble actually enacting and having results to things. So, for instance, there will be malinvestment in a brand new stadium, and it'll take millions of dollars out of hardworking taxpayers' pockets. The idea being tourism will come to the area, that there will be conventions, perhaps, that it'll stem economic growth. But we can't predict the future, and so if that happens, for instance, you can then also have a downturn in that local economy. Many times, a lot of big government projects aren't completed, or they actually cost multiple times more than initially thought of. One of the things we mentioned briefly earlier was home rule, and that's a power that is enacted by legislatures throughout the United States, and it's interesting that it actually works differently in different states. In Colorado, for instance, they have like a local covenant or a local constitution where it actually binds local officials down by that local constitution and stops them from raising taxes beyond certain points, so that they can't just spend wildly, incur large amounts of debt. It stops them. Well, of course, in Illinois, we don't have local governance. So as long as your population is over 25,000, they can now enact all sorts of laws and fees that the state government doesn't have. So, for instance, parking fees, stickers for your car. It'll have local regulations, as well as possible eminent domain, the stealing of your property for government benefit, and that's usually what it comes down to. So there's a number of reasons why they raise taxes, and then as to why these politicians continue to stay in office, it boggles my mind. I think, unfortunately, our voting process in our elections in the United States are severely broken, and that many voters, unfortunately, as Forrest mentioned, look at voting as an emotional thing. There's a lot of signaling. They hear it's for the children. They hear things that they love. Bernie Sanders supporters, free college, free this. It sounds great. I mean, that sounds wonderful. But they have no idea of basic economics and that these things can't work. And so I think that's a stumbling block, and that's something that we have to work to be able to try to inform voters and be able to get them to hopefully have more knowledge in the voting process. But that's why local referenda can be so powerful, as there's basically a yes or no vote. You don't have to put your faith into a local politician. It's just a basic couple sentences and yes or no, raising taxes, lowering taxes. So it can be very effective.
Taxes have been raised in Chicago, property taxes and other taxes to pay for pensions.
Last year, the most historically high tax increase in Chicago's history, over $588 million. And what was that for? Police pensions, firefighter pensions. They've also added on another few $100 million for the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund, for the Chicago Teachers Union. And now there's been new legislation that I believe if they pass it, not through the voters, of course, it'll be the Board of Education, that'll tack on another $250 million. So in Chicago alone, we're looking at a property tax increase of nearly $1 billion in the last 12 months. And they're going to stagger those fees over a few years to, make us feel better about it. But it's absolutely awful, and we're seeing this across the United States, and that's why it's really important to us to try to get our message across and try to publicize this information.
Yeah, Adam.
Recently, I've been very interested in some of the taxes that aren't called taxes. So that'd be occupational licensing fees, a lot of the fines that you give to especially lower class minority people for breaking, what are questionable laws. And this has obviously become a big topic recently because, in my opinion, a lot of municipalities are using their police force as violent tax collectors on the populace. Yes. And I'm kind of curious, how much you guys have looked into that. If it's, I would assume it would be a big issue going forward, given what we've seen just in the last week. And I think to the point that you guys were making earlier, that's a very emotional issue. If we can get the word out that the reason that the confrontations are taking place, Eric Garner was killed because he was selling cigarettes because
That's crazy.
New York taxes doubled the price of cigarettes. Alton, Baton Rouge, the guy was selling CDs.
Yeah.
These are guys that are targeted for stupid reasons and literally for, very small taxes, but make up, I'm sure you guys know the numbers, the percentage of budgets in like Ferguson.
Right.
Great question, and that is something that we hope to focus on in the near future because it is such a nationwide issue. We've done a lot of pension studies on police, both local and state police forces, because many of them are exactly that. They're armed tax collectors. We saw that in Ferguson. That is basically what that city had become. And it's a vicious cycle. You get a fine for a parking fee, perhaps. You are unable or accidentally miss your court date, another fee. And all of a sudden, you can't get out of that hole. Or, as you mentioned, the effect that it's having on minority communities is very real and astonishing. That if your permanent record is smudged with some type of possible minor offense, or even otherwise a felony, for instance, you basically are not given a second chance. You will come out of prison and you will be forced to most likely deal in black market activities because you're not able to obtain gainful employment that can help you revitalize your life and possibly your families. I have to give him credit. Senator Rand Paul has been very, very good on this issue, and seeing that this is changes that have to be made from Bill Clinton's early mandatory minimum sentences and things like that, which has devastated communities throughout the country. So we absolutely will be focusing on that more. But it's disgraceful that we would put law enforcement in such a position where they are trying to gain tax revenue and possibly have violent confrontations. It's very, very troubling. Yes, sir.
Next question.
It's logical to conclude that if you're paying, let's say, 50% taxes, if you're paying Uncle Sam 6 months out of the year, then it's very disincentivizing to work.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a direct relation between raising taxes and the unemployment rate?
That's from a sound economic standpoint, I would suggest that that's absolutely the case. That's a darn good point. I mean, I think what's the number today? The number of people that are actually out of work in the United States, 90 million, I think. Is it 90 million? It's a very high number. That's an excellent point. From an economic standpoint, I think that would be a decently logical conclusion.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Alton Yee. I'm the chair of the Brooklyn Libertarian Party, www.brooklynlp.org.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm sorry, your name is?
Jared.
Gerald. Yeah, Gerald. You hit the nail on the head when you said that all taxes are taken at the point of a gun. You mentioned that, okay? People don't realize that. Okay, that these are, if you liken the government as a mafia operation, the governor could be considered the Don, the legislator the family, all kinds of enforcers would be all kinds of, any number of the agencies, and of course the taxing agency is the bagman.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, when you talk about pension reform, okay, now think about this. There's these car shows that restores rust buckets. There's a point when you cannot do it. You cannot reform this car. You got to junk it. Pension reforms is an oxymoron. You cannot reform these. You need to junk them. New York State was having the same problem with unfunded liabilities with pensions, and then I personally know a teacher who's got this golden pension. Oh my God. The unions, because they are getting such huge benefits. I mean, it's a political thing. The benefits are concentrated on them, and then the people who's paying for it is spread out. So I'm going to pay only $2. Why should I care? Okay, these people are getting $200 million. Okay, now the question you asked, I guess rhetorically, why are people not revolting? Okay, I think it's passivity, the resignation. Okay, they see omnipotent government, and besides, everyone has a hand in the cookie jar. Government benefits, welfare, and stuff like that. Okay, I mean, look, myself, I got to admit that. Okay, my state and all that. But another subject, I was giving these little oversized fortune cookie slips that describes Irwin Schiff, the father of Peter Schiff.
Yeah.
He's arguably the greatest patriot until he died in October 2015. He staged a one-man war against the IRS. Okay, he was too polite. He had all these briefs and stuff, and he thought they would roll over. Okay, my logic is impeccable. Research. They jailed him. They sent him to these Star Chamber trials, and then he has a sentence. He said it is mind-boggling how the Department of Justice, which is the executive, and judges, the courts, which is the judicial, they collude together to keep this racket going, the income tax. And he has his book called, he wrote many books about the income tax. One of his
I
greatest.
think we're all here familiar with
Okay.
Irwin Schiff.
Absolutely.
Okay, but I don't know the other people there. Okay,
Sure. We are running out of time.
Okay.
So
Anyway,
Sure, go ahead.
but how can we? Well, millennials, the people who don't have assets.
I think I can cut
Okay.
to the chase.
But
History shows that full bellies don't revolt.
Well, what about millennials? They don't have any assets. They could revolt.
No. History would show that full bellies tend not to revolt, and so I think we're seeing in some instances now where certain communities that have been isolated are really, there's a lot of tension right now because they're in bad shape, and you're starting to see that. But for most of America today, poverty can often involve obesity and subsidized housing and cell phones. And so as that continues, it's going to be hard to get a mass movement, in my opinion. This is my opinion.
And because, as you mentioned, everyone is connected to the system as well. So everyone kind of has skin in the game and reasons to go along to get along. And that's what's unfortunate. And as to the pension reform, we have to be pragmatic, I think. We would love to see all government pensions abolished. Absolutely. The problem is that's very difficult to convince legislatures to do. So there are some steps you can take immediately that would make changes. In many states, for instance, changing from defined benefit plans to defined contributions would have significant effects on the amount of unfunded liabilities and debt accrued by states. So even small changes like that can have many benefits for taxpayers, although our end goal would be to fully get rid of these systems. And government unions, that even FDR was opposed to such things. So I mean, not to fall back on FDR, but even FDR, big government loving FDR, saw that there's an iron triangle between government unions trying to negotiate with the government itself and having no accountability.
Well, the unions are really, the labor unions are really the fourth branch of government, That.
So we've got time
Absolutely.
here yet, so apologize. We've got 1 minute, 2 minutes, so let's make it quick.
Yes, sir.
Just to add a little on the pension funding, being a teacher in Nebraska, I'm required to fund just under 10% of my income, and I hate it. I was on the phone for about 1 hour with the HR department complaining that I have no control of the money. I'd like to see that go away and control my own cash and see where it would go on my own.
I applaud you, fine sir. You are
Yes.
heroic.
But just to add, kind of flip the coin, it seems like we're playing a lot of whack-a-mole, like smack this tax reform down, smack this one down, study this one, tell them why it's ridiculous. I guess to flip the coin, could we think about what taxes are needed and try and just think about we only need these taxes, don't worry about anything else, just to kind of simplify the thinking in that form?
Well, again, pensions, public pensions are a big problem, and it's an abusive system. And to give you one extreme but true, unfortunate, the highest pension in Illinois is, I think the gentleman retired at age 55. He had several pensions working in public teaching.
$500,000.
$560,000 plus a year is his pension. We have many thousands of pensions over $100,000 a year. And the taxes are, again, it's a very abusive system.
Okay, that's it
We'd
there. We got
love to
to
talk to you about this
Yeah.
further. We're out of time. But thank you very much for the question.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everyone.